Welcome. Glad that you're here. I just want to let people know that we have amazing alumni here to talk about collaboration. And so we have the people from a collective called MILAGROS, Felici, Asteinza, and Joey Fillastre. And we have Madison Hayes, Ashton Langrick here with us. Thank you for being here and welcome. And for the students that are here, if you would like to ask any questions, we'll be monitoring the chat. And occasionally what happens during these talks too, someone might mention something and a referral to a website or something. And if we can try to put those things in there, or if you want to add something to the chat, please, you're welcome to use the chat to do that. If you have any questions for our guests, please don't be shy. Go ahead and ask those questions in the chat. And then we have tons of things to talk about. And at the end, maybe around 15 or 20 minutes toward the end, we'll leave that for Q&A, and then we'll get to those questions at the end. So anytime you have a question, please feel free to use the chat and do that. So without further ado, I think we'll get started. So the first thing that I'd like to do is introduce everybody with a PowerPoint of some slides, and I'll read the introductions for each person, and then afterward, it would be great to hear from each of our panelists a little bit about yourself, a little bit of an introduction. So I'll start with our slideshow. Let me just get that going. All right, so we're going to start with our guests, the MILAGROS Collective, Felici, Asteinza, and Joey Fillastre. And along with their ever-changing cast of collaborators, MILAGROS creates site-specific works that explore the history of place through striking arrangements of color and mark. With an exuberant style that champions the handmade and the intuitive, MILAGROS energizes public spaces with effervescent patterns that obliterate the seams between structures and highlight the unique attributes of the surrounding architecture. Working to reinforce individual strength through collaboration, MILAGROS operates according to the belief that mutual respect and trust allow for a free environment of evolving creation. The spirit of playful spontaneity MILAGROS brings to their work results in community-based projects that create spaces for positive connections. So welcome and thank you for being here. And next we have Madison Hayes. Madison graduated from Florida State University in the summer of 2021 with a dual degree in art history and studio art with honors. During her studies at FSU, she held internships at gallery. Oops, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm having a technical issue. Here we go. Sorry. She held internships at the Galleria degli Uffizi, FSU's MoFA 621 Gallery, and the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach, Florida. As of this past August, Madison has completed her master's in art and museum studies from Georgetown University. While living in DC, she has held positions as the social media manager for the Smithsonian Center of Folk Life and Cultural Heritage, and has interned with the National Women's History Museum. She is currently serving as the marketing specialist for the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. So thank you. Thank you, Maddie, for being here. And lastly, we have Ashton Langrick. Ashton, during her time in the BA program, Ashton discovered her love of museums and arts management through her participation in FSU's theater management courses and the museum studies minor. With this new career perspective, Ashton continued her studies by attending the Art and Museum Studies MA program at Georgetown University, where she gained specialized training in museum education, collections management, curation, and exposure to auction housing and international art law. Having completed her MA, Ashton went on to work for the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, working in archival and collections management capacities. Now, Ashton is happy to report that she has been appointed to a senior leadership position at the Sangre de Cristo Arts and Conference Center in Pueblo, Colorado, as the Director of Education and Programs. She reports that many of the skills and experiences that she gained through FSU's courses, programs, events, and internships prepared her for her future successes. She would like to thank faculty, staff, and community for providing her with such a positive and life-changing experience, and for continuing to be a supportive community who welcomes alumni involvement post-graduation. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Super excited to hear from everybody. So what I'd like to do is spend just a couple of minutes just to briefly introduce yourself. Maybe some of the things that we didn't hear in the introduction. What did you study at FSU? When you were here, what have you been doing since then a little bit? And, you know, what are you doing now? So whoever would like to start us off.
We can start.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Felici. This is Joey, like they said before. I graduated in 2009, I believe. So it's been a hot minute. We've done a lot of public art projects. We've worked in restaurants, gone to grad school, taught art classes to kids at the public library. I feel like we've done a lot of things since we graduated FSU. And most recently, we just completed a big mural in Miami at this new hotel that's opening called the Arlo Wynwood. So that's like the first thing kind of in our rearview mirror right now. And we're currently working on an installation for the atrium at Mocha Jacksonville. So, and we're living in New Orleans.
Yeah, in school, we studied a bunch of different things, but we weren't really specialized in one field. I did a lot of drawing and printmaking, and did a lot of like directed independent studies and stuff. But we've both made art all our life, and it's just always been what we wanted to do. So me personally, when I got to college, I like did not really want to like do drawing one and stuff. And so I kind of like found the back door and kind of like schmoozed the person who
Phyllis,
Phyllis,
you can't do this anymore. But back in the day when we were in school, Phyllis was there, and she would just kind of, if you were tight with her, she would let you take whatever classes.
So I took drawing one my last year, and took like experimental drawing my first year. So it was like, I don't know, the system was more exploitable, I think, but it worked out well.
That's great.
I studied painting a lot when I was there. I was a Mark Messersmith kid.
Yes, Mark just retired. Yeah.
It's good for him.
That's great. I know. Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Maddie, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can go next. So I graduated from Florida State in the summer of 2021. So I'm a pretty recent graduate. I actually came into Florida State as a biology major, thinking that would be kind of my end goal kind of career. And then I ended up, switching to art because I ended up, just thinking I'm going to pursue my passion rather than something that I think will be stable. And I feel like through pursuing my passion, I found so much stability, which is something I feel like is kind of awkward when you're first initially pursuing art. And so I graduated in 2021. I with a dual degree in studio art and art history. For studio art, I focused on fiber arts, and so I was working a lot with latch hooking. I participated in honors in the major, and Liz Dodonna was actually my supervisor through that. So that was a really great collaboration opportunity I was able to participate in. And then for my art history degree, I was focused a lot on Indigenous art, more contemporary Indigenous art. And since graduating, as Liz said, I pursued my master's at Georgetown University, where, like Ashton, I also participated in the Sotheby's program. And so I had the opportunity to go to London for a semester, which was a really interesting opportunity to study over there and learn more about contemporary art from that side of the world, and also learn about art and luxury as well as digital technology, which also kind of lends itself to my social media background. And currently I'm in the process of being onboarded as the marketing specialist for the National Portrait Gallery, which is a really exciting opportunity. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Maddie. And Ashton.
Hi, yeah, great to be here. When I was at Florida State, much like Maddie, actually, I came in wanting to be as a biochemistry major, thought I was going to go on to be a great pediatric neurologist and all of that. And then discovered that wasn't the route for me that I had planned on my whole life since the second grade. So pivoting is a good thing. Liz actually was my advisor when I switched to the art major. Not really sure what I was going to be doing and very stressed. And my parents, unlike most, were actually very, they asked like, well, what are you going to do with an art degree, but also not like super judgmental about it. And I was like, Liz tells me to trust the process, so we're just going to roll with this. And then I actually specialized and focused in the printmaking focus. So silkscreen, letterpress printing, took some bookbinding classes. It was great. That's actually the medium I excel at, which I didn't know. I actually entered the art major to take photography. And then I actually do have a photography business now as well, which is kind of great to be able to enjoy that passion on the side. But yeah, I like to say I've come to my place of being sort of by a lot of happy accidents and taking a lot of risks and trying a bunch of different things. So I ended up in an upper division theater management class as an elective one semester, realized I was really great at art business, and that's how I was going to really pursue my passion in the art field. I don't necessarily make art I think people would want to buy, but yeah, I'll be able to help other artists and museums achieve their goals through my work and being very detail oriented, which has been nice. So I did do the museum studies minor. I worked a lot with the museum studies department at FSU. I was interested in FSU as one of the best programs, I would say. But I ended up selecting Georgetown's program because I hadn't had the chance to study abroad yet. And that was, a benefit for me, much like Maddie. I also selected to go to Sotheby's in London, where I actually focused with my thesis on deaf and hard of hearing audiences and the ADA and how we can learn from other countries and be accessible in our content, in our facilities, in our exhibits, and all of that. So I've taken a special focus in that. I've taken some ASL courses, a couple at FSU, and then I've taken a couple here after school, and it's been great. Colorado, I've actually worked up in Colorado Springs, where the deaf school for the state is there. So we get a lot of populations for those who are deaf and blind, which has been lovely to be able to work with those audiences. And yeah, so I worked for the Library of Congress. My focus, I think, through my education journey was to try as many different areas and types of museums and like libraries and archives, and seeing how diverse the skills that you learn from these programs can be and where I best fit in terms of which sort of company to work for. So I did the Library of Congress and the Olympic Museum, the Olympic Committee. I'm now at a smaller regional art museum. I actually got my start with the Gadsden Art Center, which I think a lot of FSU interns since myself have interned there, and their staff is really, really great. So, yeah, I'm in Colorado now, and the weather is great. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ashton. So, so thank you for those introductions. And now I'm going to get into the questions from the students. The first group of questions are for everyone. So we'll start with those, and then we're going to work our way into the individual questions that students asked. So the first ones are for everyone, and Joey and Felici, maybe you could start with us for this one, but we'd like to hear from all of you. So the first question was, how do you find people to network or meet with how do you go about setting up a collaboration with them? How do you divide responsibility when collaborating?
For us, it's pretty organic usually. Usually like there's people that we're either like drawn to their art, or like we feel like we relate to the mission of the organization, and we just kind of try to talk and develop a relationship, and all that stuff pretty much develops organically for us.
We have run like different art spaces and stuff. Like we ran an art space while we were in school in FSU, and then when we got out, we started another art space in Gainesville and kind of brought a community together around that, and just kind of got like our names out there. People saw what we were doing and were interested in it. And you either meet people at like events that you throw, or go somewhere and find people that are like-minded, that we usually, if we're going to collaborate with somebody, like we kind of try to find people that are doing stuff in the same spirit, but have like focused on a different skill set. That's like what interests us. So like like somebody who's like really ambitious about making handbags or something, like we might like
paint a bunch of textiles,
like
for
paint
their
a bunch of fabric and see if they'll make some stuff out of it. Or but a lot of it is just like being present at the things that are important for your trajectory. So we'll go to art shows that we think that maybe like would maybe the artist there would be into what we're doing and we're into what they're doing, or just to support people that we already know we like and want to work with. A lot of collaborations are based on this, like a specific project. Like we'll see a call for like projections and stuff, and it's like, well, we don't really do that. Like I don't know how to projection map. I've got like a pretty limited knowledge of like Photoshop and video stuff, but we have a lot of friends or know people that would, and so we'll reach out to them. And but yeah, I think that a lot of it just like builds organically, and it's usually based just on work you put in. So if
showing up like is like everything.
Showing up, but also like doing your stuff, getting good, making stuff, something that like people are kind of like, whoa, that's cool. Like that's how people will approach you usually, is just like getting out there and being visible, as well as going to other people's things when they're trying to be visible. So yeah.
Okay, and then so so you said part of it was like figuring out what your limitations are, or what you're really interested in focusing on. Is that, when you find people that you want to collaborate with, is it kind of like what you're doing? Do you try to find people that do something different to bring those together, or more, it's more of like a like-minded or similar process? Or
I think that like it's like the spirit is the same, like they want to, we're always trying to make like something big and encompassing, and like with a lot of impact. And so like we're drawn to people who are also like making a lot of work, who are maybe like filling spaces, or
have some kind of maximalist tendency, probably.
But we really go in like all different directions. Like you showed like some murals and stuff, but we also, we make clothes, we make small individual objects, make sculptures, we've started making like pots for plants, and just all sorts of different things. And sometimes the thread and what you're looking for in a collaborator, or who you can collaborate with, is like it's not always like super obvious. It's hard to say like exactly what makes a good collaborator, because there's also like you can get involved with people and like invest a lot of time, and then like realize that they're kind of like not great, like kind of bad people or something, and then like,
or just maybe your values are mismatched in a certain way.
And then so it's like, it's life, it's a learning experience. It's you do the things and you try to like keep yourself open and positive, and then
sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like even whenever it's like someone that we had a good collaboration with and it falls off, like it's always usually a good learning experience, and like you learn how to develop your intuition more and like listen to your gut, and learn how to like protect who has access to you and your art and your energy and stuff, because all that's finite.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ashton, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I actually take kind of an opposite approach for networking. I strategically and intentionally seek out opportunities. I use Facebook actually quite a bit for their events where you can click like networking events in the area. So I'll try to find groups that are of similar interests that I have, or are part of a project or a community organization that might have the same goals as me, or if I have a vision, if they would be benefiting from that vision or that goal, and perhaps if they have the resources or the knowledge, or if I can ask around and see, what can I be doing that would benefit the community. I think I'm very, I guess I'm more innovation minded and goal oriented in the way I approach collaborations, in that I try to solve problems. So the area I currently live in is actually, the demographic is very, low income. The county only has school 4 days a week because they can't afford to send kids 5 days a week to school. So there's gaps in the community where, we can fill that fifth day void with arts education and arts programming, for example. So I approach it as, getting to know my neighbors, getting to know the other players in the community, asking, how can we help? What have you wanted to do for a long time that you haven't been able to achieve? Trying to reach out to organizations that have a similar mission to us. So our mission is that we create artistic and educational experiences for everyone. And that is our mission statement. So we try to improve access and those sorts of things. While I was in school, I went to a lot of, much like these talks, going to like the networking events the department would throw. If there were like artist talks or career talks where people in the field were coming in for a panel and there was a meet and greet, I went to those a lot. I would also, inquire and sometimes cold call or cold email, people or organizations that, I might want to work in a job like that person, or I would want to work for that company, and just asking a lot of questions like, hey, I'm really passionate about potentially becoming a curator or working as a preparator. What did you do to get there? Tell me about your life and your career. And then the important thing for me is also the follow-up. So it's not just taking from that person the information, is building, you have to build like a long-term commitment. Like, at least for me, people that I might have interviewed or connected with 10 years ago, I'm still in touch with, and I keep up with them, and check in and see how things are going. And I'll try to go visit their museums, or, really continue with that follow-up. And it's like building a lifelong friend or acquaintance in a professional capacity. And then also offering when you can be beneficial to them, finding ways that you can reciprocate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I would, seek out people. A lot of, asking perhaps a professor or someone you've met, like, oh, hey, this is also something I'm interested in. Do you know anybody I should talk to or inquire? And there's been a few times where I'll go to one person and acquire them, then they have a friend or a colleague and they put me in touch with them for something else I'm interested in. And then building that, but also continuing that follow-up is very important, and remembering details. So that's sort of how I would approach those things. It's more of a strategy, but I'm also in, I think, a less creative capacity in my roles and how I work. So yeah.
Great. Maddie, how about you? What is your approach?
So typically my approach has been with meeting people primarily professionally, has been through my internships, through my graduate and undergraduate courses. I feel like especially during undergrad, I leaned a lot on my faculty members and really tried to use them as, to help me support my my goals of what I wanted to do in the future. I also leaned a lot on my community. Similar to Ashton, I use Facebook quite a lot to see what networking events are coming up, and in general, just like events at an art museum. I'll attend those, and maybe I would have the opportunity to talk to an educator or a curator and kind of establish those relationships. I also very frequently I'll cold message people on LinkedIn, and I feel like that's how I've been connected to a lot of the people who are still helping me in my career today. Informational interviews have been so helpful for me, not only as a way of meeting people, but kind of deciding, what are opportunities I could take advantage of to be where I would like to be. And I feel like that's where I found out about most of those opportunities. And as far as like for the largest collaboration that I've been a part of, was during undergrad. We were actually in Dr. Fee's class, and we decided that we would create a club at FSU, the Museum Society at FSU, because we wanted to create a community of people who are interested in museums, interested in like the professional as well as the kind of personal opportunities that could come from engaging with museums. And so that was great because I was very art minded, but I could also be in a club with someone who was more science minded. And so it kind of opened the doors for other opportunities. We could all kind of work on our strengths to create a resource for people to use, for undergrad. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. So the next question is kind of in the same vein, but I think maybe we could expand on it a little bit. So it sounds like from what you all are saying, what I heard a lot of was that there needs to be, or you feel like there's a certain amount of openness that you have to have in order to create a space for collaboration. But are there other qualities that you think are important? Or what would you say are the most important to have when you're collaborating with others? And is there maybe some example or something of a collaboration that you've had that would exemplify that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could go first on that. To me, some of the most important things are being honest about your deadlines and expectations and setting those ahead of time, again, in a professional and kind way. And also, being cognizant of other people's time and their other obligations that, if you're working with a third party, like let's say a vinyl company or a company to, that's sort of providing a service, but you're also collaborating with them on a large project, is being aware that you're not their only client, and being aware that, communication is super, super key, making sure that you follow up, that you check in, that you don't just assume someone has all the information, and just, I'd say communication, being timely in what you have to deliver to them and what they're supposed to deliver to you, checking in, and just also being accountable. So if you know that something is due to your collaborator or that you committed to completing a part or leg of the project, making sure you do the follow through on that. And if you're struggling, admit to your group that, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can someone help me or point me in the right direction of resources where I can accomplish this goal? Or, hey, I'm running short on time. I personally, in my collaborations, set earlier deadlines for myself than the project deadlines, so that if I hit a roadblock, I have time to either seek additional help or to give myself extra time to complete that because I committed to that. And I think just being like honest with everyone about that, as well as kind, and remembering that people have lives outside of the projects that you're doing, and giving people grace when things might be challenging. And then, if you complete a collaboration and you're going to be working long-term with that group and something didn't go well, having a time to, in kind of a non-like combative way, discuss like what went well with the last project, what didn't go well, how we can improve and resolve those challenges. Because going forward, if you don't address and resolve and have a strategy for resolving those things, then that same working style or roadblock is going to happen again, and you're just going to get frustrated and not enjoy working with that person. And I almost guarantee that you're going to probably be a little bit of a less pleasant person to work with, that they are receiving that energy from you. So just being also aware of that and trying to be solution focused is a phrase that we've been using, and we've had a lot of those challenges here when I first came on, but those are resolved now. So
I can go next. So for me, at least with my experience with social media, has been a lot of really embracing the process and being very flexible. As the social media manager for the Center of Folklife and Cultural Heritage, that was my first time working on a project where it wasn't, an exhibition's coming up, these are the dates, it was more of me being on the ground. Every day was a new something happening. Sometimes certain people wouldn't show up, and so you had to kind of sub content. And so when you're working in that collaborative manner where you're working on a festival and you have different people who obviously prioritize, their projects and what they're doing, and they want them to be shown as much as possible, you kind of have to have that give and take of, okay, well, these are my expectations for today of what I have to post, and also I feel like being receptive to feedback is really great as well, just in the sense that, you might post something and then the organization might come to you and say, okay, well, we would have loved if you would have done this. And so then, for future. So also just having like that open line of communication, that transparency, I think is really great because it helps you professionally. And then, for the future, what questions you should be asking in those situations.
Yeah, I guess all that stuff's really good professional advice. And yeah, flexibility is like really key. I would agree too. We always try to make sure too that when we're working with like other artists or people helping us, that everyone is fed. Like food's really important when it comes to like being in a group. Like that can be like a huge linchpin between having a really good experience and a really bad experience. And just like having a lot of compassion for the people that you're working with, and just like knowing that like things can just go anyway because you're not fully in control. And if you're a control freak, I would not suggest collaboration.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I mean, yeah, I think just like keeping aware of people's like physical states, especially if you're working like really hard, is important because people will burn out. They'll, it's better when everyone feels good physically. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of an art collaboration that people don't really think about because they get like so focused and kind of forget that they also have a corporeal form that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, exactly. An annoying food thing, but it's really important.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially we had a collaboration yesterday that took the whole team, and food was a big deal. I would also chime into that being expressing your appreciation for the people working with you is also something that's important, letting them know that their time, their skills, everything is valued. So I would just also add that.
That's great. Yeah, we forget about those things. Like people do get hungry. Do have to take care of them. Okay, so the next question that the students asked was, and this is for everyone again, we all have something that goes, and again, you all are touching on this already, but we can go a little bit deeper. We all have something that goes a little awry once in a while. What has been the most eye-opening moment in which you have failed successfully when working within a collaboration? Whoever would like to chime in first.
I can go first. I think this touches on the question, but it was something that I feel like I did fail at in a sense, but I feel like through my failure, I was able to grow a bit more professionally. My first internship in the museum field was at the Uffizi galleries in Florence. And, in order for you to do a internship in Italy, they require you to take like the first level language course the semester before, and then take second level while you're doing the internship. My Italian skills are horrendous. I speak zero Italian. It's more just like written rather than spoken. And so when I had this opportunity to intern with them, I thought, it's a pretty international museum. They work with people around the world. So I was expecting going into it that I would be around people who spoke English to an extent. but I was surprised when I came in and no one spoke English. And so it was a lot of me having to lean on my very, very broken Italian skills and their very broken English. And so it was an interesting opportunity where I feel like, you know, I failed in the sense of my language, but I succeeded in what I gained from the opportunity. You know, I had the opportunity to work with their digital archive, which was really amazing. I feel like I picked up along the way some Italian, but it was a situation where when I was first in it, I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. This is going to be a very strange experience. But through that, I feel like with my future internships in the museum field, I've been more patient with people just because I realized that, you know, everyone's coming from different backgrounds, and it kind of took away a bit of the anxiety that I feel like that comes with going into like a new environment and meeting new people.
Okay, we have a few tangible examples of how the failures ended up being successes in a way, or led to deeper, longer collaborations. The first one, that library mural that we did, the original application was for a completely different project that was like a series of like 10 or 15 murals in this part of town, and that project kind of went really south, and like only a couple of murals got done, hours got canceled, and all this stuff. It was kind of like a shit show. And then
Sorry if we can't say that.
when the
No, it's okay.
when the call for the library came up, they only pulled from people who had turned in this application for the other thing, and it was like super rigorous. And so I
They
think
didn't even open a call.
they didn't
They
open a
just
call.
chose from the applicants of this other
pool.
project.
So even though that project was like a big failure, we put so much time into the application. Because of that, we were like one of only like 5 or 6 people that got contacted to make an application for the library. And so we ended up getting it. But if we wouldn't have done that like horrible application, that we were just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. Like, it's so weird.
It was
They're asking for
crazy.
the
They were
weirdest
asking for like 30
requirements.
copies of like each
We had
material.
to like go to
We had to go to
Kinko's and like make all
Kinko's.
these pamphlets, and then like I don't even think they looked at it, but we
But
were,
we did it,
but
and we knew
got
we
into
had to do it
that.
right,
So,
because when, you know,
um,
paper pushers want the paper to be the right way, you got to follow the directions. It's like the step. And then another time where something like went wrong, but it ended up being really good for us, was when we did our first project for Art Basel in Miami. We were supposed to set up at this art fair, and we were up until 4 a.m. setting up this stage for our friends who were going to do a musical performance on it. And as we were finishing, the director of the fair came and told us we had to take everything down because we were blocking the view of the booths from the opening of the door, and they were paying like $5,000 an hour for that view or something. And then he was like, well, you can have it up, but I can only choose the pieces that are up. And we're just like,
and it could only go up 4 feet, and the
And
piece is like 18 feet tall. So we're like, and then like as he was like putting us through the ringer,
our friend's manager, like the band's manager, comes up to us and was like, do you want to just take this down and set it up somewhere else? And we're like, yes.
it's like, my friend's opening a bar in Wynwood, and their grand opening is tomorrow. So we just took it all down, moved it into Wynwood, and then like it ended up being like an epic show. Like there were like all these like famous musicians played on it, and we ended up having like a really close relationship with the bar owner, and we still go down there like every year and do more work. We built out like a courtyard. It's a bar called Gramps, and
yeah, we like built out their courtyard, built all their furniture, did a bunch of murals. And so now it's like our like regular kind of art residency that we've been doing in Miami. And that was like over 10 years ago now. So that was a really good failure.
and then the last one was we did a big mural in Decatur,
Outside of Atlanta.
on a like a train overpass that goes through their downtown, and it got delayed for a while. And so when we finally got to start, we painted about half of it before it got too cold, and like our paint just wouldn't dry. It would just freeze on the wall and then drip the next day. So we had to leave and come back when the weather was better, like 4 months later. But in that time, this organization called Kaboom saw it. They reached out to
The city,
the city reached out to them, or they
no,
reached
they
out
reached
to the
out to the city, and then the
and,
Parks Department got a grant through Kaboom to expand our project. So we were able to put like a little play space underneath our mural. So if we hadn't have hit the weather delays and all this stuff, we wouldn't have been able to like branch out into this new territory for us. So at the time we were like really defeated because we'd never not hit a goal for like finishing a mural like that, but it was like totally out of our hands, and it ended up being a good situation that it was postponed. So that's all of them,
Yeah.
I think.
That's it. Those are the only ones. That's great though. A lot of happy excuse me, happy accidents. Ashton, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say pretty recently, this past semester, I was tasked when I took the directorship, was to bring back essentially all of the arts classes the Art Center did in its glory day, to the level and extent that they were pre-COVID. And that was kind of, which I now understand was not the expectation, but at the time I was told that was the expectation. So I actually developed a children's program, expanded it to ages kindergarten through 12th grade, and I launched 56 classes this semester for kids of all ages to have the option to take. They'll have a choice of 2 classes for each age bracket every hour of the day. So we operate kind of filling that like 9 to 5 school time, work time schedule, to where we keep them with us almost kind of like daycare, and we, let them have packed lunch and whatever. But the way I estimated it is I was like, okay, I need 3 kids in every class, like to break even on the class or on the program. No big deal. I can hit that because they used to fill and max out. We didn't have enough classes or teachers to service the community, because we offer scholarships, and the programs are like $8 a class. They're quite nominal, but they're arts courses. And so I haven't been able to fill those classes. I've had, I think, about 60 students, which the board of trustees and everyone are very pleased with and impressed with, because we were doing none the past few years. We've gotten great feedback, but it's been a great learning opportunity. So I'm having to continue these programs, or choosing to, but I'm changing the format to be a more successful format in the coming semester. And just the community has been really like pleased about it, but we're also struggling with the community knowing that we're here and we exist, which is kind of unique, being that Pueblo is a small town and a small community. But I guess a lot of people haven't heard about the Art Center, and we're kind of the umbrella organization for all of the other creative corridor arts galleries and organizations in town. So we're working on that, but yeah, so I was told that was the format we used to have. It didn't quite go well in a post pandemic demographic now. So we're able to pivot and change that to better serve the community. And our goal, I'm not sure within how many years, but in the near-ish future, is to acquire the building next door and transition that into all new classroom spaces, and have an entire building that provides the top tier arts education for the state of Colorado. So that's a new goal that we're going to be aspiring to achieve here shortly. So I'd say that was kind of like a failure, as I expected to house about 400 students in classes, and I've gotten about 60, but we've learned a lot, and we've gotten a great client base now that's growing. So being, not letting yourself be disappointed by that, and just continuing everything as like, okay, we learned, we're growing, and let's just make the next best thing, I think is kind of the lesson in that. So.
Great. Thank you, Ashton. All right. So our next question, moving right along. I love this question. And this is, again, for everybody. This is our last one for everyone, and then we'll move into individual questions. So the next question is, what does collaboration mean for you in a more political sense? Do you think we can achieve a more collectivist mindset in the art world and move away from a profit motive?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can jump in first on that, because where we're at, like I said, we're supposed to be seen as that umbrella organization for everyone else in town. And Pueblo is one of several creative corridors in Colorado. So we're home to a lot of, local artists, local galleries, art collaborative groups who work together on different projects. So I guess for me and for us, we're trying to move towards that and embrace the rest of the community who, under past leadership that is no longer, the Art Center was seen as sort of this elitist kind of group that wasn't open to the community or open to collaboration for a long time. So we're changing that mindset and welcoming everyone back in and actively trying to increase collaboration. I guess in a sense too, that we're focused on like art of the Southwest and Southwest artists. So trying to be almost like an art collective, and our Art Center also services 19 other counties in Southern Colorado. So we're trying to branch out that we're essentially this larger, I guess, not art movement, but almost like way of thinking in supporting the other more rural counties. But in terms of politics, I mean, we're a nonprofit museum. We're trying, I think, to, be profitable enough to make bills, but also to expand our offerings at a low price to as many people as we can. And really just inspiring everyone in the community, and also having offerings that are either free or they're like a seminar or like a big conference where artists in the community can come to learn from masters in other areas, so that we're building each other up. In a sense. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what that question was asking, but that's how we're approaching it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ashton.
I think that with the capitalism question, like, until we can abolish it as a system, I don't think it's really possible to work outside of it. So really, like, we try to be rainmakers when we do any kind of project and be like, how can we get more funding? How can we hire this person to help us? Like, I think that like something that people don't talk enough about in art is money, and being like really more clear about where it's coming from. So we always try to be like, we always try to follow this thread to where the money's coming from, because that's going to say a lot about the impact of your project, because you don't want to be using your art as a force for developing and gentrification and displacement, because that's like the classic thing, at least like especially for us with murals. So we really try to have a like spread the bread philosophy, and we try to make sure that everyone's getting really fairly compensated when they work with us, or we just will do it ourselves if we can't afford to pay correctly, because it's not fair under the systems that we all have to live under.
Yeah, that's a bigger conversation that we could have, right? Just on this topic alone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wish that I didn't have to think about my art in the context of making money, but I do, and yeah, I would say that if you're someone who cares about money, I wouldn't recommend going into this field.
It's hard. Yeah.
At least like studio art, like making it as a professional artist is really difficult. And we are constantly like riding a roller coaster. And sometimes we're really flush with cash, and then other times we're really struggling. So if like your fancy haircut is a big priority for you, I would say maybe look for a job in admin or something there you get a regular paycheck.
Right.
But
Maddie,
also,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Felici.
Also, though, I do believe that there is a good collectivist spirit about working together and all that stuff. Not that I don't believe in that, but I just kind of feel like we can't even begin to talk about that unless that system is dismantled. But I do think we can all build more stuff together. It just depends on if you can pay people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Maddie, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I guess I think of this question more as as someone who works for a museum as like a social media manager more than I do as an artist necessarily. I mean, for me, collaboration, when I think of it from that perspective, is, engaging, exposing people to new ideas and to new movements and stuff that they might not initially come in knowing. And so I feel like this is definitely something I need to kind of continue to think about more, just so because working with the Smithsonian, we are a free institution. And so it's free for people to come and, expose themselves to different artworks and different histories and whatnot, as well as, with participating in our educational material as well. And so I would like to think, in a sense, the art world is more collectivist as far as like we're collecting these ideas, we're exchanging these ideas, and we're, using different techniques to create connections to what's going on to the world politically, and to tell those stories and those ideas. And so I feel like sometimes I do forget about the the profit motive behind it all. And so I feel like that's something that I need to kind of start paying more attention to in like my in my work and in my personal life. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Maddie. All right, so we're going to move on to, and time is quickly getting away from us, as it always does, into the individual questions. And I think the next one, I'm gonna pair two questions together, starting with Felici and Joey. So the question for you was, what is your favorite part about altering and energizing public spaces through community collaboration? So what is your favorite part? And then I'm going to pair that with, are there any barriers or problems when it comes to working on community-based projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, especially if you're going somewhere where you haven't lived or you don't have that much experience. You kind of are at a sharp learning curve because you have a finite amount of time to figure out what the needs of the community are and like how you can best serve them, because you want, like for us, it's really important for our work in another place to like be wanted and desired by the community there. And sometimes that could even mean like recognizing that we're not the right artist for a project and giving that away, and or like suggesting someone who would be better, so there's like a lot of challenges that arise from that. And you can get help from like outside organizations and stuff, but like just being really cognizant of like how your stuff is going to interact in these communities and if it will in fact even work. But yeah, I mean, we have been really lucky that like a lot of people really love our projects that we do in other places. And it's like really sweet because like, especially because of like social media, people will contact us years and years after we've left a place and be like, oh, like this has been my favorite thing to pass by. I walk by it every day on my way to school, or like this brings a smile to my face or whatever. And like, that is like food for the soul. It really can help, especially when you're having like a bad week or a bad day. Like those kinds of things can really change your whole demeanor for the day,
And I think that like, interacting with the community and collaboration with community comes in like so many different ways. So sometimes we're collaborating with like city entities to try to like literally figure out how to get something done, like what are the logistics, like what roads need to be closed down, what equipment do we need, can we get this from certain entity for cheaper, like can we borrow this pressure washer. So there's like a lot of like navigating that and like remaining pleasant and stuff, because it's like you don't want to ask like one person for too many things, so like trying to like figure out how to like not stress a certain person out, like kind of reading if they're the ones that are taking out too much or who can actually help you. So like social navigation is really important with community projects, as well as like the impact of the actual art, like how's it going to remain, like what's it going to be like. So like we think a lot about like often trying to relate the subjectivity either to the specific place, so they would feel like, oh, that piece is actually about like whatever plants are around, or that like but also just like thinking about like what do we do to this piece to make it like last a long time and not fall apart. And I think that a lot of it is just like keeping keeping the community on your mind? Like like how do you offer them this gift that isn't gonna like fall apart and stuff? But
And like the best things that we've been able to do, like we get to have like community input or engagement sessions. So like people will tell you what they don't want and what they do want. And that stuff is really valuable. And if you have enough time to do that, I highly recommend it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, Ashton, I have a question for you. So let's see. With your expertise in different museum settings, what is your favorite and why?
Sure. So my favorite, which is actually not what I thought it would have been, is I prefer the smaller, more regional museums, kind of the mid-size, but on the smaller size institutions that do really feature art from their region and their local art. And that really stands out to me because, you know, like I said earlier, I tried to get an experience like an internship or to work for like kind of like one of every type of place and size of museum type of institution. And I just really found when I worked for a bigger institution like the Library of Congress, I kind of felt like I was just another number. Like I was valued by my immediate team, but it's kind of like once the show's up, okay, maybe your name is on the back of a pamphlet with 50 other people who also worked on the show. But I felt like my job was really specialized, whereas my first internships that really got me into the field, I wore a lot of hats and I really enjoy wearing the different hats and being able to work cross collaboratively with all the departments and different departments and really lending my skills elsewhere to make other departments more efficient or to find them better solutions. And I just feel like that sense of community with a smaller institution is better because you'll get the same kind of repeat customers coming through. Or for example, we did a really labor intensive community day and we had performances from all over the city and local groups. And at the end of the day, the last show, a gentleman had left the theater and he was probably in his late 60s. And he was just in tears after the symphony and came up and said that how much he appreciated us having this day and this opportunity, because in 60 some odd years, he had never been to a symphony performance and he never thought he would, and how much that impacted him. So really getting that feedback from your community, that what you're doing is appreciated. I really thrive on that and knowing I'm making a difference. And I found that easier intrinsically to receive and from working in a smaller museum as opposed to the larger ones that I've worked with and for. But that's just my preference. I've been fortunate enough, I think, to have worked with the exception of one, that every supervisor I've worked under or alongside was really positive experience. And that also kind of made the difference, I think, in that.
Great, thank you, Ashton. Maddie, I have a question for you. And before I get to Maddie's question for our guests here today, for those of you that are here and listening, if you have any questions toward the end, if you have questions, we'll field those questions at the end. So anything that you want to ask our panelists here, please put that in the chat and we'll get to those. So if anything's coming to your mind and you want to ask, go ahead and put that in the chat. But Maddie, and excuse me for my frog that I suddenly have in my throat. I want to ask you, what does collaboration look like in social media marketing? And the other part of that is, what is the role of community collaboration in your current position?
Yeah, so what collaboration has looked like for me with social media marketing, it's typically just me collaborating for the most part with my staff at the museum, whether that be the curators, educators, even visitor services sometimes. And collaboration also looks like feedback through engagement. I'm always having to keep a pulse on kind of what audiences will kind of be receptive to, what other museums are doing. And so in a sense that with me keeping a pulse on what other museums are doing, it might be more of like a one-way collaboration in the sense that I'm absorbing this media and I'm going to kind of alter it to kind of as a way of engaging with our audiences. And so it's almost like a twofold collaboration. It's me being the messenger of things that are happening at the institution to our audiences, and then seeing what our audiences will really respond to, and then applying it to my social media practice. For example, it's been extremely popular for museums to kind of try and engage with audiences as far as asking them questions on posts. And so that's something I try to incorporate into all the content I'm making. And then right now, my most recent role, I'm still in the process of being onboarded, so I can kind of speak to this more from the Folklife Festival experience. With that, I was working with several organizations, from Earth Optimism, which is a Smithsonian, I'm pretty sure it's like a environmental initiative that we have, and where we have groups all around the world. And so we had people from Fiji to everywhere else around the world, which was really cool. And so I was having the opportunity to collaborate with them. And then this year our theme also was United Arab Emirates. And so I was having the opportunity to collaborate with artists as well as storytellers, and trying to figure out the best ways to convey those stories, and as well as those kind of cultural differences that would kind of draw people into wanting to go in person and learn more. So yeah.
Great, thank you, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go back to Felici and Joey. I have a question for you. So if you're able, could you talk more about your future projects? Where are you in the process of collaboration on site-specific works to strengthen individuals through community connections? And maybe, I think, could you talk a little bit more about the site-specific part and how that plays a role in the work that you do?
Yeah, right now, we're working on like a fabric-based installation to go in this atrium space. And we're collaborating with the museum and starting to talk to like this gallery about doing like a kind of satellite show to it. But this project isn't like super community based, it's more of like a traditional interaction between us and this museum, and
the people who are going to go to see it.
the people that are going to go to see it, of course. But we're not like there's not like a whole lot of like altruism involved necessarily. It's like we're doing this thing and it's something we want to do, and it's part of the collaboration with that right now is we're one of our main collaborators is like a clothing designer. Like they do a lot of sewing and stuff, and right now they're making like some quilts out of a lot of the scrap material, and I think they're gonna try to make like pillows and like bean bags and stuff. So we're kind of like empowering them to explore this new direction of like functional sewing and stuff. So that's part of the way that this collaboration is like enhancing our connection with them, and kind of maybe creating a new direction for the future.
With the place stuff, like I'm kind of like, you wouldn't look at it by, it wouldn't come apparent by looking at me maybe, but I'm a bit of a nerd. I love to like do a deep dive. So like I love to just like research like the actual like history of the place, like who came and settled it, who are the indigenous people, like what is the function of this neighborhood I'm gonna be in, like what kind of people live there. And then like if we have time, I like love to just like go to wherever we're going and get there early, so I have like ideally like a week or two to just like kind of soak the vibe in and just kind of suss out like what is the thing that would be helpful for this community, and like what is the kind of things that it seems like they would have stake in and enjoy and could help buttress what's already there. Because I think a lot of people like to say like placemaking, but like, there's placekeeping too, where you're just trying to add to the sabor that's like already there, so we kind of try to do a mixture of real research and vibes,
I love that, placemaking and placekeeping. That's great. Yeah. I mean, when you're thinking about site specific, it's what you said, the history, and then also what does that community need the
Yeah,
community
like
needs.
how can you add is sometimes is the tactic more to like enhance what's going on? Like I think that that's usually the answer, and that's what people like rally behind, is like what they already like are familiar with, but like how do we make it extra, you know? And then because sometimes just like clearing the park and putting like these like ugly statues from old white men in it is not like
Gonna do much
the answer in
to
2020. Like no one cares. It's boring and gross sometimes, you know? So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, next question. We have a little bit of time, and I see we're getting some questions in the chat, so that's great. So we'll definitely get to those. Let's see. We have Ashton, let me ask you a question. Let's see. How do you and tell me if I'm not sure, based on the work that you do in your museum, if this is specific to your experience, but see what you think. How do you feel about museums returning objects to their places of origin? Have you been involved in museums taking new directions with this?
Yeah, so I think in general, I had an experience while I was in London at one of their museums with the Elgin marbles, that I was tasked with going to see them, had to write a report specifically on those, or something to that nature. And when I went to ask a gallery attendant, which gallery it's in, because I was lost at the time, it was so massive, and they kept correcting me. They didn't know what I was talking about. They're like, "You mean the Parthenon marbles?" And just having this understanding that even like the phrases in which we refer to those objects by is really debated with more prominent museums and pieces. So that was kind of a unique experience. I personally and professionally feel that returning items to their places of origin is important, in the sense that, nowadays, like I feel like we shouldn't like demonize the organizations or the ways or the people who like sourced those items per se. We should just be like, okay, how we operated back then was a different set of standards than we go by today, but we're going to correct that now today and just do the best we can moving forward, and getting those items back where they belong. Because a big point of contention with the topic of doing so is that the tourism brought to, let's say, the country who might have quote unquote maybe looted or acquired the item by shady means, they're receiving all this tourism, and that's a monetary benefit to their country and their institutions. Whereas you're profiting off of something that's not yours, where if it went back, like I know that the museum in Cairo, when they had opened, they recalled a lot of their items from other museums. A lot of museums gave items back that were originally from Egypt. And now Cairo can receive a lot of tourism dollars and also have their own heritage to be able to allow their populations to enjoy and learn about their own culture. And I was really supportive of that. So I think it's a great thing. And I would hope that organizations are doing that in the most ethical ways that they can. In my personal experience, where I've worked, we don't really have anything of that nature that would need to be reappropriated. I did a lot of studying through the master's program with the National Museum of the American Indian, with the Smithsonian, and learning about, repatriation and how we care for those objects, and making sure that if you're continuing to keep them, that you've been given, permissions and the blessings of those tribes, and that you're really keeping those items and treating them the way they should be. Like some items of those cultures like can only be looked at or handled by male curators, or they have to be taken out or facing a certain way, with like the sunrise or the sunset. So understanding if you are housing those items, even with permission, that you're respecting those traditions and how those items are used. And in my particular museum, our big issue, rather than repatriating artifacts or artworks, is that we have artworks that were painted in a period of time that now are considered distasteful. So again, we have a collection of Southwest artwork that they might paint, let's say, Native American, braves in a glorified perhaps sexual connotation or other types of, not great context. But they're in our collection because they were donated, let's say 50 plus years ago by people who painted them a long time ago. We don't really show those, but we have them in the collection. We might perhaps bring them out to talk about the larger context of work and how we've evolved and what is appropriate in terms of depicting other cultures or claiming that that you are perhaps, we have a couple artists in the collection who claim that they're members of that community or that culture when they're not. So trying to kind of navigate that sort of challenge of, well, the artist is dead. He has no family for us to either confirm or deny his claims, but we suspect X. So yeah, repatriation I think is great in general when done the right way.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Maddie, too. I see your comment in here. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that as well.
It's just a huge topic right now. And I mean, I feel like oftentimes it seems like the response that museums will give kind of against repatriation is more of the imperialist mindset of, oh, well, this country won't be able to care for these objects in the way that we would be able to. But at the same time, there are the tourism dollars that are going to see these objects that could be brought to these other countries that would probably really need them and really appreciate them. And it's also just weird to think that not only is it the objects, but also I know I'm pretty sure there's a few museums in New York who also house the remains of Indigenous people, which I feel like is also a very weird conversation to have where you're refusing to return those remains to those communities. And so it's a really hot topic right now and something I'm trying to keep up with as best as possible. But yeah, I just think that's something that everyone should be paying attention to right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to piggyback on that because a student did ask you a question that maybe is along a similar vein. What do you feel is important about having a dedicated focus to women's history in museums?
Of course. So my initial focus to women's history didn't necessarily start until after I graduated from FSU. And as well as being in some courses where we're predominantly male dominated as far as the artists that we were learning about. And so when I started interning with the National Women's History Museum, that's when I kind of learned how underrepresented women were in museum spaces as well as art spaces. It's weird to think that in the year 2022, we don't have a in-person museum solely dedicated to women's history. It is something that is in talks right now with the Smithsonian. National Women's History Museum is a separate entity, but it's fully remote. So it only exists online. They've had collaborative exhibitions at a few different libraries as well as different institutions, but there isn't a solely dedicated space for women's history. And it's obvious that there's a community that really wants that. I mean, the National Women's History Museum has a huge following on social media. And at least for me as a collaborator within that museum, as well as an observer, it made me so inspired and so empowered with my femininity to be a part of a museum that was focused on women's history. I mean, I feel like I learned about so many different women who had really public roles, but did so many other things that no one knew about. For example, Heidi Lamar was a very famous Australian actress who also invented Wi-Fi, which is something that it's like you wouldn't necessarily know about. And so I feel like at the same time as I was creating content and learning more about these women, I was also, becoming more passionate about the role of women and what we can, uncover about women of the past and the present.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we only have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get to one of the questions that was in the chat. And again, if anyone wants to ask any questions in here of our guests, please put them in here and we'll go till 2:30 and we'll see how much we can cover in our short time. So question I see here, and this was for everyone, so whoever wants to chime in here, how has your studio art studies prepared you all for doing all the different things that you're doing now?
I guess I could go. I would say through the printmaking focus, I really learned, endurance. I think a lot of projects, there were a lot of late nights at the studio. If something like one of the prints didn't go right or your registration was off and you had to scrap it and start over, learning to accept that and then just push through to get the project done. I think that was really important. And also really understanding, I think a lot about collaboration and networking through that, because you kind of get to know a lot of other artists and you learn techniques from them. But in terms of my particular art focus, I feel like the variety of classes we had to take within the major was helpful because I can understand and relate to other artists. A lot of the professionals I work with and have worked with at all my museums are also artists. So being able to even have conversation with someone else about one of my direct reports, she's a ceramicist and she's helping me with my programmatic strategies for bringing back pottery studio and pottery classes. And so I'm able to, have a base understanding of, art terms and different methods, or I have a lot of instructors who are, drawing is their medium or painting, and being able to have meaningful conversations with them, but also respecting their craft. And I think that really helps with building those relationships and to be able to have good professional working relationships. I think that's kind of what I took from that.
I would say that studio art was really what you put into it, and you can't really have any expectation that just going to the classes and going through the program is going to amount to really anything. It's really about, it's a unique direction to go through in school because it really is about your own ambitions, and nothing's going to happen with your degree if you're not taking advantage of all of the opportunities. You have to be dedicated, use the materials and the equipment you have, because
When you
likely
graduate, it's
you
gonna be
won't have
gone.
it, and you'll never have a chance to really know what things to invest in. If you're interested in printmaking and you get really into it, that your future is in buying a press, but you can't, it's really difficult to get a press and a welder and try to get involved in ceramics and a forge and screen printing. And we try to do as much as we can, but the reality is our focus is pretty much based in paint and mark making. And we might not have realized what our focus was without being able to run the gauntlet of all the different medias and stuff. But yeah, it's I think that was the best part of going to college for me personally, was just being able to use all the resources and really dig in.
Yeah, buy, cheat, and steal to get your education if you have to. If you're not getting enough out of it, figure out how to go after hours. Befriend your graduate assistants and ask them if you can go after hours and use the print studio. Do whatever you have to take to make it worth it for your time.
Yeah, the more you're there, the more they'll give you. If you really dedicate yourself to a specific thing, they'll let you do weird acid etching and get really deep into it, but not if you're not present,
Yeah, I completely agree with that too, that if you're kind of interested in something specific, what I liked about the program at FSU is that you could really kind of try a bunch of different things. Like I took a foundry class to figure out, is public sculpture something that I would want to dabble in or to pursue? And I think really, if you think you're interested in something, definitely try a class, or think of if there's particular classes. There's a girl I went to college with in the art program for studio art, and she was a biologist and she wanted to go into medical and biological illustration. So also knowing you can kind of mix and match from other departments to suit your personal interests was something I think was really beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, to Joey's point, I feel like the studio art degree is really what you make of it. I feel like FSU has some really great opportunities, scholarships, and courses that can really help you figure out, where your passion lies as far as being a maker. I feel like for me professionally, the studio art degree has helped me immensely with social media, which is something that I feel like not a lot of people expect. I feel like for my foundation courses, I got a really great grounding in, digital design and digital art in general, which has made me a stronger candidate for social media roles. I feel like also from the perspective of a maker, I feel like I can kind of tailor my content more as from a maker perspective rather than like a researcher perspective, which I feel like art museums really appreciate, because it just brings a different, it has like a nicer, I'm trying to think of the word, just has like a nicer touch to it. And I feel like overall it's just been really helpful in my furthering education to kind of have that background. And I feel like if for those who, are pursuing studio art, who might also be pursuing something else, it's also something great to come back to every once in a while. I still love latch hooking in my free time just because it's a great way to like decompress, and it's a great way to also find community in a sense. In DC, we have a pretty big artistic community here, and I find that I'm able to kind of connect more with my peers as well as people who I'm working with on a day-to-day just because of my artistic background. I feel like almost 90% of people who work in a museum have started from that studio art role, and so it's really interesting to kind of connect on those levels. And so, I mean, if I could go back and do my whole FSU experience from the beginning, I would have loved to really take advantage of the studio art classes and the studio art community more at FSU from the beginning, and maybe not do biology.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah. So I don't, Carrie, forgive me if I'm missing a question in here. I'm seeing a lot of great comments in here. Thank you for everyone who's contributing to the chat. But I'm not seeing another question per se.
No, you're not, Liz. I've been kind of catching them on the sidelines actually. So if we have our final question, if we'd like.
Yes. So thank you, Carrie, for reminding. I was going to throw another question out there.
Oh no, sorry.
No. I totally, yes. Thank you for reminding me. So I have one more question, and this is perfect to kind of wrap this up. So if you could go back in time, is there any, and this is for everyone, if you could go back in time, is there any advice you would share with yourself as an undergraduate student at FSU?
I feel like I would kind of make myself feel a bit more confident as far as like imposter syndrome is so real. I feel like especially from the perspective of a maker, you see what other people are doing, and sometimes your work might be different in its own way, and you might feel the need to have to compare yourself to other people, but I feel like the differences is what makes your work stronger in a sense. And so I would want my younger self to know that, imposter syndrome is okay. Really trust the process, because I remember Ashton making a point of like, happy accidents. I feel like that's a lot of what studio art is in the process of making and, pursuing a career in art. It's a lot of like happy accidents, and some things lead to, even greater successes.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, really true, Maddie. I would say what I would probably do different is maybe like two things is like one, like be kind to yourself and not really compare yourself to other artists and makers. Because I always thought I was a subpar artist. It was kind of like, am I in the right track? Until I did find, kind of my great fit. But I'd also would probably go back and tell myself to temper my expectations, because I think I was really passionate about like, oh, if I do really well and I work really hard and I get like the perfect decimal points for the GPA that I want, then the great job is going to come right away. And really understanding that you can do all of those things and do everything right and really stress out on if you got like a 0.4 or a 0.5 on your GPA, and that's going to matter one day. Because I was really focused on that in undergrad, and that really ended up not mattering in the end. But also knowing that if you graduate, or when you graduate, that If you don't get the job you want right away, that it's not that you're not destined for it or that you're not, good enough to achieve that job, and just being patient with the process and understanding that, the market might be different or the place you want to work. Like when I moved here 4 years ago, I wanted to work for this particular art center. It was the best one in town, best one in the region, actually. And I wanted to stay in art, but that wasn't the opportunity that came to me at the time. They didn't have any openings. And instead I ended up going into the world of sports for a while. And I learned and just embracing the different changes that come and just looking at everything as an opportunity is what I've really tried to focus on. But I would get really disappointed that the promotion I was promised didn't come or fell through, or I wasn't moving up fast enough, or managers weren't respecting my expertise in the field, and not trying to be discouraged, because for a while I thought, oh, my master's degree was a bad choice in going and getting it, because I thought that it was dissuading me from becoming hired. I was almost too qualified, but it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen that kind of quote that's going around. It's like when you're trying to sell your car and you go to 3 different places, and someone offers you a low value, and then you finally find the person that offers you the high value who appreciates what you have. That analogy is very true. So just keep trying until you find a place that acknowledges, your skills and your value, and not taking it so personally the first time if someone doesn't. So I'd probably tell myself those things.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashton.
I guess I would tell my past self to just hold on to the people that I'm simpatico with in the situation, and that those people are going to end up playing a big role. And also that there's no one way to do this art thing, and that everyone's path is valid, and everything is changing so much right now. So if you're not going down the looking for a museum job path, and you're just like self-financing your art career, that's totally valid and okay too. And that, yeah, just to keep going, because it's going to be hard. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
I think that's fine.
It's going to be hard, but rewarding. Hopefully. Yes. We have 2 minutes left. So I think that's it. I think we'll wrap it up there. But I just wanted to say, the conversations went into some really interesting directions. And I feel like even though we tried to narrow it down by talking about collaboration today, it's still, there were some interesting things that were happening with what you all were saying that I feel like we could just do more with those singular topics. So I really appreciate you opening up this conversation into a wide, thinking about collaboration in a very wide way that I wasn't prepared for. So it's got me thinking about, what does collaboration mean, and, all of the different aspects to it that we really need to, as cultural producers, as Sharon Loudon likes to say, as cultural producers, we need to think about these things and be considerate and compassionate producers. So I really appreciate the things that you all mentioned today. So any last things that you'd like to, any shout outs or anything that you want to direct our audience to?
Oh, one last tip that I think is a really good advice that everyone can benefit for is befriending lawyers, because you'll meet them one day and they're really helpful people. So go to that law school, get yourself a lawyer friend, y'all.
Do you have any suggestions, Felici? Have you ever worked with anyone like the volunteer lawyers for the arts or anything like that?
We've gotten legal advice from them before, but honestly, we've just somehow collected a ton of lawyer friends for whatever reason. They really like to have fun when they're not working.
Yeah.
And so nurture those relationships, because a lot of times one letter from that kind of a person or one email from that kind of person can shut down whatever your struggle is. And don't be afraid to use that resource. It's not as scary as it seems.
Thank you.
Weird advice.
Not weird at all. Really good advice. Maddie or Ashton, any last things?
Just as like a general practice, I mean, even though I'm not practicing as an artist for a career, I feel like I still like to find inspiration everywhere, even from the most unlikely places. And something I remember from your class, Liz, was you had mentioned, always have a notebook with you, or always have something with you where if you see something, you can write it down and always kind of reflect back onto it later. And I feel like still in my day-to-day, like I do that because I feel like it helps me, personally, where if I, I'm stumped and I need inspiration for social media, I can refer to that. Yeah, and so that's something I found extremely helpful. And so I recommend everyone does that.
Great, thank you. And we'll be looking out for your social media posts in the future. Ashton, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I remember you telling us to carry, a pencil and a notepad everywhere. And that is true. People also think you're a lot more intelligent if you have that. And that actually also spurs some conversations with some unique people. But I would also say, whether you're with a company or a business or not, make yourself a personal business card and carry them with you everywhere. Because you'll run into a lot of people and you might not have the time or something to write something down with. Maybe you forgot your notebook that day. But I've had a lot of people, like, we'll get into an engaging conversation, maybe at a restaurant or on the street. And then like, they'll ask if you have a card, so they can either connect with you or whatnot. And I'd say, yeah, I don't go anywhere without my personal cards and now my company cards, because it's kind of like whichever context you meet someone in, to always take advantage of those opportunities. Yeah. And then, shout out, I also forgot Carrie was my advisor for a long time too. So yeah, trust your advisors, ask a lot of questions. And it is really the amount of work you put into it. Like, I really focused on resume building and learning how to write and do your elevator pitch and just practicing all of those things. And your advisors are a great resource to you to as a sounding board to run those by, and for the rest of your life. So.
All right, thank you. Carrie, was there anything on your end?
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for your time. It's lovely to see you, and I just applaud your accomplishments and your adventures. You all are just amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I appreciate all of you for taking time out to share your insights with students. It is much appreciated. So I appreciate your time and thank you for being here. So I think we'll adjourn. If you all want to, our panelists, if you all want to stay on for a quick second, if you need to go, that's okay. But I just wanted to say a thank you before you go. But for all of our guests here, all of our listeners, thank you. Students, thank you for being here. We will share a recording of this later. So if you have friends or peers that weren't able to be here today, we will share that with other people. So, but thank you all for being present. Appreciate it. Hope you have a good Friday, a good weekend. Thank you so much.